All right, we're keeping an eye on Janet Yellen speaking in Boston. She says she's going to raise rates a quarter point this month, next month, the month after that, another month, 3 more points next year, 6 points after that. Kidding. I just want to see if you're paying attention, America. No, she's not really saying it. She's certainly not going to telegraph what her plans are, that she's looking at all these variables and improving economy steady as she goes, which is what various Fed officials have been saying for months now. But the betting seems to be, and you know how often that goes, that they're going to move to hike rates in December after the election is behind them, whoever gets elected, and maybe continue a steady stream of such hikes. Of course, it's not worked out script once they started this process a year ago. It was won and apparently done. All right, we'll see what happens now. In the meantime, we've got Gerri Willis joining us. We've got Charles Payne. We've got economist Lindsay Piegza, because we also have a survey out from the Wall Street Journal, and this is as bold as Economist gets. They asked them, in the next 4 years, is there possibility of a recession? Oh, yeah, 60% see that as very likely. Bold, Charles Payne, that's probably a gimme. That sometime in the next 4 years we could be looking at that. But what did you make of it?
I mean, you could go out and say there definitely would be a major snowstorm in the New England area, either this January or between now and 2021.
I know they're a cautious bunch, but
this is ridiculous.
Who could tell this economy is so punk you would never know if we went into recession?
I'm just saying there's a possibility of a slowdown.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, beware. I mean, okay, now what action do I take? Listen, I think that maybe the overarching theme is that the economy is still in something akin to first gear. And people should wonder, after all of this time, all of this stimulus, all of this help, why, and if there's anything that can be done to get it out of first gear.
That's well put. Lindsay, we always know that it was unrealistic to keep rates this low for this long. Well, of course, it has been this long, and rates have been this low. I noticed that one Fed official, a district president, governor to another, is telegraphing it's about to change, but it doesn't change. I don't know in the end how Janet Yellen deals with this or what she says to tip where she's leaning, but they all seem to be leaning with a rate hike, and increasingly the betting seems to be December. Do you agree?
Well, I think what we see is that Fed officials are increasingly anxious to raise rates. But as we saw in the September FOMC meeting minutes,
why? Because they think they're behind the curve?
Well, as you just said, we've been at these low levels for such an extended period of time on a historical basis that given these low levels, they would expect that the economy would begin to gain momentum, and they don't want to fall behind the curve. So that's really the thesis of the hawks, that we need to start raising rates now because eventually, sometime, the economy is going to begin to pick up speed. But on the flip side, we hear from the doves that there is no evidence that the economy is gaining momentum, that we're seeing inflation pick up. We're still talking about just 1% average growth across the first 6 months of the year. And by the Fed's own internal forecast, they don't expect this year's growth level to reach even that new lowered bar of 2%. And so really, there is no evidence that low rates have had the usual positive effect on the economy as they have in the past. And here we sit at this slowly non-accelerating growth rate, slowly bleeding into a possible recession over the next couple of years.
Do you think, I mean, despite that bold prediction on the part of economists, that a slow, very tepid recovery like we've been seeing does stretch out that period at which you would normally see a recession kick in?
I think all the old rules are broken, right? You know, if you're in a hole, stop digging. That's what we should tell the Fed, right? Because they're not just hurting, you know, the banks are complaining about low rates. It's average Americans who are getting killed in this.
But is there inflation? Do you see inflation? That's ultimately what they would raise rates for.
Well, but they're all talking about jobs. I mean, yes, inflation, but unfortunately, Janet Yellen is talking about the impact of the Fed on jobs. And there was concern among some of them in this meeting this week that, you know, possibly what's going on in the background is that if we just hold these rates low for a little bit longer, maybe people will jump into the job market. It hasn't happened so far. What makes you think it'll happen now? I think it's time to rethink our assumptions and get busy with helping people who are near or in retirement.
What do you think?
Well, for the Fed, those aren't the people that move the needle, right? So they're looking for that virtuous cycle, and they're looking for people to have a feeling that they're wealthy because of the market or any other asset, and go out and spend that money, whether they have it or not, charge it up. And I think that's the problem that they're facing right now is the job situation is. We just had this so-called JOLTS report, which is a very important number for Janet Yellen. It talks about how many job openings there are. It dropped 7% in 1 month. So it's a real interesting thing, but let's talk about that one dove that in the last time voted for a rate hike. He is looking at bubbles, more specifically commercial real estate. So if you say outside of the fact there's no inflation, why would they take action? They might be concerned that these asset bubbles have gotten away from them and that they pose a greater risk to society than they would be willing to admit.
In other words, the people buying the $8,500 million penthouse condos in New York and Miami, the first sign of that getting... And
we are getting the first signs of them. We're getting them through a variety of different things, including a recent report from Cochrane. I mean, they built so many of them. How many 100-feet story tall, $100 million apartments can we have in New York City?
Well, you have 2.
I know, but then after that, you know, what am I going to do?
And you have 4.
Who's there? Who's there?